All right. Well, I think we should get started. So, good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's webinar, Nowhere to Go, Women, Girls, and Homelessness. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that I'm joining you from this evening, which is the Turrbal and the Yagara people here from Meanjin, Brisbane. And I invite you all to acknowledge and think about the traditional owners of the land in which you're joining from tonight also. I pay my respects to their connection to land, to water and culture, and to elders past, present, and future. I acknowledge that I am first generation Australian in my family and that I am the daughter and granddaughter of Jewish immigrants to this land, and that when they arrived, this land had been taken care of for tens of thousands of years. I want to also acknowledge that First Nations peoples in Australia are significantly overrepresented in housing and homelessness statistics, reflecting the ongoing impacts of colonisation, systemic discrimination, and intergenerational disadvantage. Now, welcome to this webinar from the NCJWA, National Council of Jewish Women of Australia. Thank you so much for joining us. For those of you who don't know, the NCJWA is the peak representative body for Jewish women in Australia. We focus on human rights, social justice, and the advancement of all women. This webinar has been organised by NCJWA's Social Justice Committee to highlight Homelessness Week, which kicked off today. You can find more information about NCJW's work at ncjwa.org.au/mission. Homelessness is, of course, not a foreign concept to Judaism. As Jews, we have a deep historical understanding of displacement and the need for shelter. In fact, according to Jewish law, stable, dignified housing is a fundamental human right and a religious obligation, which is rooted in the principle of tzedakah, known as charity. I'd like to let you know that there are many ways you can get involved in systemic advocacy, including through digital campaigns. That could be signing a petition, or that could even be getting campaign resources and using that in your circles or at your workplace. Two great campaigns going at the moment include one from Homelessness Australia and the Everybody's Home campaign. And I will be putting those links into the chat shortly. Volunteering can also be an enriching way to play your part in ending homelessness, and some amazing national organisations include Sky Laundry Australia, Rise Up, Rosie's, and Oz Harvest. I would now like to introduce Maya Glassman, a dear friend of mine and the moderator for this event. Maya currently works for Queensland's peak body for housing and homelessness, QShelter, as a policy and strategic engagement lead. She's also a member of NCJWA's Social Justice Committee. Originally from Haifa in Israel, Maya has spent much of her life working at the intersection of politics, community, and social change. Her early career focused on human rights and peace building, with roles in both Parliament and NGOs, where she worked to promote peace and build a more inclusive society. Over to you, Maya.
Thank you, Shaina, for that meaningful introduction and for the incredible work you're doing within the Jewish community in Brisbane and through QCOSS to help create a more inclusive and compassionate society. It's truly been an honor to collaborate with you on so many projects here in Queensland. So, National Homelessness Week is a time to raise awareness of homelessness and to highlight the importance of social housing as a long-term solution. I'd like to share some key insights and data to provide context for today's conversation. Homelessness in Australia is a growing and urgent issue. According to the last census in 2021, over 122,000 people were experiencing homelessness on any given night. However, we know these numbers are outdated and the reality today is significantly worse. What's important to understand is that homelessness is often hidden. While we frequently picture people sleeping rough, this only accounts for a small portion. In fact, just 6% of people recorded as experiencing homelessness in the last census were sleeping on the streets. The vast majority are living in cars, staying in overcrowded or unsafe dwellings, or couch surfing with friends and relatives, often without visibility or any support. This crisis is being driven by multiple interconnected factors. A major one is the chronic lack of long-term investment in social and affordable housing, which means there simply aren't enough secure, affordable homes for those who need them. We are also seeing the pressure of the rising cost of living, particularly through rapidly increasing rents. This is pushing more people into housing stress with fewer pathways to stability and independence. But perhaps the most devastating driver of homelessness, particularly for women and children, is domestic and family violence. More recent data from the peak body organization Homelessness Australia paints a worrying picture. Between May 2022 and March 2025, the number of women and girls who were already experiencing homelessness when they accessed support services rose by 20%. And heartbreakingly, nearly half of women and girls seeking assistance from specialist homelessness services, SHS, have experienced domestic and family violence. This tells us that for many, homelessness isn't just a housing issue. It's a direct result of violence, trauma, and systems that failed to intervene early enough. It's clear that we need to do better. Now that we've set the scene with some context, I'd like to dive into today's webinar. As I'm sure you can appreciate, today's theme is emotionally charged and deeply sensitive. If at any point you feel the need to take a break, grab some water, or step away, please prioritize your well-being. Self-care is vital. Today, we are honored, truly honored, to be joined by three powerful women with insightful ideas and stories to share. We'll begin by hearing some opening remarks from each one of them, followed by time for a Q&A from the audience. So please feel free to share your thoughts and questions within the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Yvette Kinkade, our first speaker. Yvette is a director of the Equanimity Project, Vice President of the National Council of Women of Australia, and immediate past President of the National Council of Women, New South Wales. She is a strategic leader with extensive experience in governance, finance, operational excellence across both commercial and non-for-profit sectors. Passionate about fostering innovation and building strong partnerships to create lasting change, Yvette is also the founder of Track Day Club, a motorsport company that fosters community and inclusion. Yvette is dedicated to create safe, more inclusive community through collaboration and meaningful action. Yvette, thank you so much for joining us today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Maya. That was lovely. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. All right, so none of us need convincing. We all know the data. We've seen the stories, and many of us are the stories. But here's the challenge. How far are we prepared to go as leaders, as women, as influencers, to confront the pipeline that pushes older women from ignored to invisible to at risk? I know that pipeline well. After a redundancy, I've been actively seeking permanent employment since 2024. I bring strong experience, solid credentials, and positive interviews. Things go really well until that Teams call. I watch the shift, the warmth drains, the questions tighten, and the energy changes. Days later, thanks, we thought you were great, but we've gone in another direction. You don't need it spelt out. You feel it, you know it. It's at that moment when capability meets visibility, and now that visibility includes age. Let's name it. This isn't about confidence or competence, it's structural exclusion. And for older women, it's devastating. Now, not all older women face the same barriers. Ageism is compounded by racism, ableism, classism, and xenophobia. First Nations women, migrant women, disabled women, women in poverty, these groups face even deeper exclusion with fewer pathways to secure work and a higher risk of housing insecurity. Because ageism leads to workplace inequity leads to financial instability, and instability for too many older women leads to homelessness. That's not a theory, it's happening now. Currently, over 19,000 Australians aged 55 plus were homeless in 2021. That was 4 years ago. More than 400,000 women aged 45 plus are currently at risk. And women 55 plus are the fastest growing homeless cohort in our country. These aren't abstract numbers. These are us, our friends and our futures. And here in New South Wales, it's even more confronting. Last year alone, over 13,000 women and 10,000 children who'd experienced domestic and family violence accessed homelessness services across our state. At final contact, over half of them were still without stable housing. 500 plus were sleeping rough or in a car. Over 4,000 were in short-term or temporary accommodation. 2,200 are couch surfing and 86 are in other unsafe housing. And though in the past decade, the number sleeping rough or in cars has doubled, and those couch surfing in the last decade has tripled. Women and children are exiting the system into homelessness. What more proof do we need that the system is buckling and it's failing them? Is work the missing link? With lived experience, I rebuilt my life from the ground up, with kids, with courage, and without certainty. I know what it means to survive systems that weren't built for you. And now, decades later, I find myself in a new fight, this time against ageism. Different system, same exclusion. We often focus on housing, and rightly so. Housing alone doesn't create stability. Economic participation does. Security does. The Older Women's Network New South Wales report 30% of HR practitioners disclosed that there is an age above which they will not recruit. And 68% of those respondents suggesting that that age is 50. We fought for gender equity, but age equity, we've barely scratched the surface. Every time a woman is pushed out of work because of her age, every time her experience is dismissed as overqualified or not the right fit, we move one step closer to the edge. When a woman who's contributed for decades at home, at work, and in the community are priced out of housing, overlooked in employment, and erased from those important conversations, we are witnessing a systemic failure. But there is good news. We are not powerless. We're not just women with opinions, we're advocates with platforms. We have networks, we sit on boards, we shape policy. So let's stop whispering about ageism. Let's call it out. It's real, it's measurable, and it's costing women their futures. So what does change look like? We need mandatory recruitment audits, ones that track age, race, gender in hiring. Superannuation top-ups for women who've spent years in unpaid care so they don't age into poverty. We need training pathways that are flexible, accessible, and designed for older women. We need secure, affordable housing policies that prioritise older women living alone. We need stronger anti-discrimination laws with real consequences for age bias in hiring and workplace practices. These are the minimum standards for dignity. Ending ageism isn't just a women's issue, it's an economic, a community, and a leadership issue. It is a shared responsibility. We must ensure older women are seen everywhere, panels, in the media, running companies, shaping policy, because visibility is power. This may be contentious, but if the fastest growing group of homeless people in Australia were men over 55, there would already be a task force, a funding package, and a front page spread. But they're women, so we pick up the pieces as families, as friends, in support organisations, in shelters, in silence, and far too often alone. Well, I say no more. We've spent decades fighting for equity. Now we're on the other side of that fight. We must ensure it extends to older women too, because we are not done. We are not irrelevant. Let's refuse invisibility. Let's demand equity. Let's ensure no woman spends her later years fearing poverty, rejection, or homelessness. Let's be bold enough to say, this ends with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvette. Wow, powerful words from you. Thank you for sharing those inspiring words. The call to stronger anti-discrimination law especially resonated with me here in Queensland, because here we are still have an ongoing conversation with the government on the anti-discrimination law. So it's really important to include ageism in recruitments. Thank you for sharing that. And I will ask you some more questions later on in the session today. So thank you so much. And now we will move to our next speaker, Dassi Erlich. Dassi is an author, an advocate, and the Youth and Family Programs Manager of Pathways Melbourne, where she is developing safe, culturally sensitive housing supports for vulnerable Jewish youth in partnership with the Lighthouse Foundation. Her commitment to this work was shaped by years of advocacy in the campaign to bring Malka Leifer to justice and a determination to build the kind of safety no child should have to fight for. Dassi, we really appreciate that you made the time and effort to join us today, and over to you.
Thank you, Maya. And thank you for having me on this very important panel. So as Maya said, I'm the Family and Youth Programs Manager at Pathways Melbourne, where we are creating culturally safe, trauma-informed services for the most vulnerable members of our local Jewish community, our children, those who have absolutely nobody else to turn to. And it means a lot for me to stand here as a change maker in the field of youth homelessness. And it's not just because of the meaningful work I'm doing, but because this issue lives very close to my heart. Before I ever sat across from a young person in crisis or sat in meetings to design the solutions, I was one of those young people myself, growing up in a world where safety was not guaranteed and the silence around that was absolutely deafening. I remember being 14. The house was quiet. My mother was in bed. But I was not safe, not emotionally, not physically, and not in any way that a child should be safe. There was no one I could call, no support worker or a helpline I could trust. I actually didn't even know that my local welfare agency existed. And even if I had, I would have not have known how to call out. And I remember creeping into the hallway one night, and this was before mobile phones, picking up the landline, actually terrified that my mother would pick up the other side of the landline and hear me doing something that she knew I knew I was forbidden to do. Call my best friend. So my best friend that night walked to my house. It was 11 p.m. and I don't remember what she said, but I remember answering the door and her giving me a hug. And just the way that she reminded me that I was not crazy and that what I was living through was not normal. I still remember that feeling 20 years later. And then I walked back inside my house because I knew I had nowhere else to go. In the world that I grew up in, getting married at 18 was not just a tradition. It was the only legitimate path to adulthood. And I knew it was the only way out. So I got married, not because I was ready, but because it was the only sociable, acceptable way to escape from an unsafe home. Years later, I led the campaign to bring Malka Leifer to justice. And one of the reasons actually that I went public was because I believe that if I just told the truth, the community would be forced to change. But as the headlines continued, something else actually began. Young people started calling me. There were teenagers, students, some were religious, some had left, some were still hiding. And they were sleeping in cars and they were being locked out and they were breaking down in their bathrooms. And they were calling me because I was one of the only safe people that they knew. And I took those calls and I answered every message that I could. And I actually let one sleep on my bed while I slept on my couch. Until one day, I sat on the floor in my living room, screaming at my closed computer after yet another meeting that had led nowhere. And I could not take one more call from a child with nowhere to go and have only my voice on the other side of the phone line to offer them. So I went to Leah Bolton, the CEO of Pathways. She's here in this meeting. I was serving on the board. She was getting the same calls from adults who were advocating for young people. because Pathways had become one of the few trusted confidential places in the community, known for dealing with issues that no one else would touch. And that's when the work began. Until then, Pathways had been focused on supporting adults who were questioning or transitioning away from religious Jewish life. But we both knew that we could not keep turning away from the vulnerable young people that were coming to us. So first we raised the money to do the research, to prove to the Jewish community that this problem actually exists. We interviewed young people, families, and frontline workers, Jewish and non-Jewish, across the sector. And the needs analysis came back with a conservative estimate that at least 37 young people per year are marginally housed or homeless. So we've partnered with Lighthouse Foundation. It's an organisation that provides safe housing for vulnerable youth unlike any other. They offer so much more than a roof. They offer stability, belonging, family, community, and for many, the very first experience of safety and home. The findings from the study were actually devastating. There is no crisis accommodation specifically designed for Jewish youth who cannot safely live with their parents. There is no culturally safe foster care system. Many young people would actually rather stay silent than risk losing their family, their community, and everything they have ever known. And I think the most frightening statistic of everything that came from that study was child abuse is actually going unreported because families and those caring for young people are scared that if they speak up, their children would be handed to a system that does not understand them. And if I had a few more minutes, I'd speak about the shame that underpins this silence and the work that we're doing at Pathways to try and dismantle that. But what we are building is kinship care, foster care, and a youth safe house that is designed specifically for Jewish young people called Orly House. And we're co-developing that with Lighthouse Foundation. We're training culturally competent carers, creating voluntary care pathways, and building wraparound supports so that no young person has to feel that they have to disappear in order to survive. And we're doing it with minimal funding and maximum energy because this is happening and we cannot look away. So I want to end with this. I do not want another child to grow up unsafe and believe marriage is their only escape. I do not want another teenager to turn to a predator because they are the first person who cared. And I do not ever want to have to pick up the phone to a young person and say to a child, I hear you, but there is nowhere safe for you to go. But we cannot do it alone. We need partners, we need funding, and we need a child safety system that sees culturally invisible youth. And we need people willing to open their homes and their hearts to care for vulnerable young people who have nowhere safe to go. So please put up your hand if you're willing to care for a young person who doesn't have a safe home, because safety is not a luxury, it is a birthright, and we can build that future together. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Dassi. Thank you so much for your generosity in sharing your personal experience with us, for trusting us with your story. Your commitment to supporting children in need, even offering your own bed, is truly extraordinary. Thank you so much. And again, we will do the question part of the session later. And now I will move on to the last but not least, our final speaker of the day, Karen Levin. Karen is the founder and director of the Equanimity Project. I hope I didn't ruin it. And a member of the National Council of Jewish Women Australia, a social justice committee. She is also president of the Rotary Club of South Sydney and a member of the National Council of Women in New South Wales. Karen's extensive advocacy work is motivated by her lived experience as well. Through her work in the Equanimity Project, Karen cultivates a sustainable model of charitable and social enterprise where communities become the solution and real impact is seen across all levels of society and government. Karen, thanks so much for being here with us today. We really appreciate it. And please go ahead.
Thank you so much. Good evening, and thank you to the National Council of Jewish Women Australia for bringing this important subject into the light, and to everyone for caring enough to listen. I'm not here simply as the founder of the Equanimity Project, but as lived experience and a woman over 45 who's also journeyed down the same pathway as far too many other women have. My abuse was both physical and coercive. Over time, I lost not just my safety, but myself. I had built a life and business in the United States for 17 years, but it became critical for me to leave. I didn't realize the extent my partner was stalking me, especially after I left him. On one occasion, while I was in my place of work, he called and threatened my life while sitting outside the building waiting for me to exit. Somehow he obtained my direct number. He remained there for 18 hours and I couldn't leave. After embarrassingly telling security what was going on, they called in the police, who placed me in the back of the police car and covered me with a blanket to escape. But they couldn't arrest him as he was just sitting in his car. That day, I realized that my only option was to come home to Australia. I was due on the plane hours after I'd escaped the building. So when I landed in Australia, I never returned and left everything I owned for a second time. I was one of the lucky ones, though I had a home to return to, even though it meant leaving my identity and years of work and friends. I got to start again, and it is that reality that fuels everything I do now. The Equanimity Project is an Australian-first charity, not funded by government and run by dedicated volunteers. We provide a different form of safe accommodation, in-depth advocacy, and a holistic approach to ensure women find their safety and financial capacity to move on with their lives. I would like to bring you into an awareness, a form of abuse that is on the rise and needs urgent attention, as it creates another platform for homelessness in women, the family court. A patriarchal system that does not address the current issues for women and children. I spend a great deal of my time in criminal or family court advocating for our clients. Today, like many days, I was in the family court. This time with a woman fighting to protect her child, an articulate 9-year-old bravely telling everyone, her mother, her teachers, the police, even the judge, that she doesn't want to see her father anymore, that he is abusing her. But is anyone listening? After several years and hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal costs, this mother is emotionally and financially drained, still fighting because her child is worth everything. And if you allow me to segue to another example, another one of our clients has spent 15 years in the family court system, protecting her daughter, draining her of her sanity, her financial security, mental stability, and self-esteem. Her daughter, now 17, has grown up witnessing the coercive control of her mother and is now experiencing it herself. She's not yet an adult, but she's wise enough to say, I want it to stop. And still the system allows it. What many don't recognize is that perpetrators are now using the family court as a weapon, a form of post-separation and legal systems abuse. Coercive control and financial abuse play out through drawn-out litigation, manipulation of child support, and ongoing threats masked as parental rights. As these women fight for safety, they are pushed further into the financial instability, emotional distress, and too often at risk of homelessness. You have already heard the staggering numbers from Yvonne, facts that are alarming. Hidden within those figures is the fact that domestic violence is the #1 cause of homelessness for women and girls. And every week we hear from women who are exhausted, working, raising children, caring for parents, often without adequate superannuation, still judged for not doing enough. This isn't just personal, it's structural and it's systemic. It's the outcome of an inequality, of gendered poverty, and of a patriarchal system that still sees women as less deserving of safety, support, and sovereignty. But I didn't want you to listen to just despair. I want to say we can do better. When I returned to Australia, I didn't just want to rebuild my life. I wanted to rebuild the system that let women fall through the cracks. I started by helping women experiencing abuse to start over, new businesses, careers, sometimes housing them as they transition to a new life. Over time, I realized I could do more, and that's why I founded the Equanimity Project, a platform designed to create a different form of protection, a different form of accommodation, career pathways, legal advocacy, and dignity for hope for women and children, and yes, even the pets. We often take them as because they're the silent victims too. Did you know that 74% of women who experience domestic violence and coercive control are highly skilled? yet we are portrayed as alcoholics, drug addicted, mentally unwell, or redundant. We have supported doctors, lawyers, project managers, civil engineers who were brought to the brink of poverty by the system, and we've helped them to regain their independence. We advocate to change the landscape, and now it's time to do more. Often we wait for governments to lead, but transformation doesn't always come from the top. Innovation comes from moments like this, from people like you willing to say enough is enough. The power of the people is stronger than the people in power. And we want to use that power to create something better, because no woman, no child, no girl should ever have to say, I have nowhere to go. I come from a long line of people whose values were and are still rooted in compassion, care, and collective strength. People who are silent achievers, people who created space for others, even when space wasn't offered to them. Through the Equanimity Project, we provide space for those who need it. Steeped in faith, in ourselves, in others, and in the connection to something greater, we stand on the edge of growth to do more. Advocating for women to rebuild a life that is free from chaos, free from controls and the confusion, finding equanimity in rebuilding a new secure life. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Karen. Those were such inspiring words, and thank you for openly sharing your lived experience and trusting us with your story. The work you're doing within the Equanimity Project is much needed, and it's truly inspiring. So thank you so much for sharing this with us. And I would like now to move to the Q&A part of our session, and I will go according to the order of speakers. And Yvette, you were our first speaker, so back to you. I would like to ask you, you clearly outlined the structural barriers older women face in the workforce and beyond, and you talked about ageism. From your experience across policy, advocacy, and business, what's the first practical step leaders and organizations can take tomorrow to begin dismantling this pipeline of exclusion?
Thanks, Maya. I think the first step is data transparency and accountability. I reckon if we don't measure age in our hiring, our promotion, our retention practices alongside gender and race, we can't fix what we won't face. So my recommendation is, starting tomorrow, start with a recruitment and workforce audit, not a PR statement, just real numbers. Who's applying, who's getting shortlisted, who's being promoted, who's sidelined, and at what age. From there, we need targets, not quotas, for older worker participation. I think especially in women 50 plus, and mandatory unconscious bias training. I think that's also key, that includes age as a category and not just gender or ethnicity. Because without the data, without the accountability, ageism stays invisible. And then when it's invisible, I guess it's excused.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It's very important to map the current situation and to see how we can achieve more accountability towards it. I'm a part of the DEI committee in QCOSS, the diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we discuss a lot about the recruitment practices of the organization. So I highly recommend any of you to have, if you don't have already, to establish a DEI committee in your own organization. Yvette, thank you so much for sharing this with us. And Dassi, to you now. What do you think mainstream homelessness services could be doing better to support young people from culturally and faith-based communities, especially when trust and identity are so tied into the help they're willing to accept?
Well, I think what we do know is that mainstream services cannot do this work alone, especially when it comes to young people that come from very strong cultural or faith-based backgrounds. There's a lot of nuance and trust and understanding that sit with the small organizations that work with that community. The Pathways actually received a government grant that unfortunately finished this year that helped to fund the research that we did. But part of that government grant was Zoom and in-person meetings with other grant participants. And what was fascinating to see was how much with that grant money, those small, tiny organizations were actually able to do with their little communities, little and big communities, because of the understanding and the nuance and the trust they had in those communities. And I think one of the biggest things that we all spoke about at our last meeting a couple of weeks ago was the fact that this funding was now ending, and a lot of those programs would actually not be able to continue. And I think it would be such a wonderful thing for the government to recognise and the mainstream services to recognise they cannot actually help every single child. There are children that are being missing, that are missed from the mainstream services, and partnering with community organisations is the best and the smartest way to actually ensure that every child has an ability to get the help that they need.
Couldn't agree more. Collaboration and care coordination is essential to really address and making sure nobody falls between the chairs. Yes, this is absolutely vital for addressing the issue in an effective way. Thank you, Dassi, for sharing this with us. And now we will move on to Karen. And Karen, thank you again for sharing your lived experience with us today as well. And I wanted to ask you about it. How has your personal lived experience shaped the way you approach your work and the design of the Equanimity Project's model?
100% it has, I think, because what I went through and what I was doing even before I formed the charity was helping and supporting other women. And I think that lived experience has, it's an encyclopedia of what you go through when you have to start again and when you have to, rise from someone taking everything from you. And so I think we need to listen to lived experience more. And I think that's why I founded the Equanimity Project, because it was a new concept. We're actually an Australian first, and I'm very proud of that. And I have a beautiful board and wonderful clients who are with us for like 3 years. Our clients are not with us for 60 days. And it's not a tick box. These are on a journey to get to the other end, and that can take 3-4 years. So I think the lived experience is crucial, that we start listening to, and it's the same with Dassi, it's the same with, everything that we hear. We need to start listening to children. We need to start listening to the mothers and to women and really apply that knowledge, because it beats a book any day. And I think my lived experience gave me some insight, but also some unwritten compassion that you can't find in a book. And so I have a lot of calm when I'm listening to a woman, I guess, because I know what she's gone through. I've experienced it, and also I know there's light at the end of that tunnel if she's supported properly. I think part of the system is, especially in the DV space, is the competition of government money. It creates, warfare just for the organizations. But I think if we look at it from a different perspective and not relying on what we can get from government, but what we can do ourselves, I think that says a lot. And it's amazing what one person can offer to create change. And I think if, we all got together as that one person, we'd make a bigger difference. So
absolutely, yeah. And I think the compassion that you bring to your role, coming from the lived experience and the understanding that you have from that, is really valuable and much needed in such a sensitive situation of the people you work with. As you mentioned in your words earlier, the family courts, it's so much pressure and so much anxiety for people who already lived through trauma. So I think holding their hands and providing your warmth and compassion goes a long way, especially in such long-term kind of a journey to achieve justice. Thank you.
definitely.
Thank you for sharing this with us and for your incredible work. And I see that we have already a lot of questions from the audience today. Thank you so much for writing. I would just remind you that the Q&A function is here in the bottom of the screen, not through the chat. And our next question is for Dassi. the question is, how do we get involved with pathways, and how can someone offer their home as a safe space, a safe place, as you offered before, Dassi, for people to get involved? I guess people are asking how they can get involved.
I absolutely love that question. That's exactly what I want to hear. People are wanting to get involved. So please pop onto the Pathways Melbourne website. You'll see a contact button that will go straight to our small little 5-person part team that is doing all of this work. We are actively looking for kinship carers at the moment, so kinship or foster carers at the moment. So if you're willing to open up your home, we would absolutely love to hear from you.
That's great. Thank you, Dassi, for this information. And maybe we can put also in the chat a link for Pathways so people can check that out themselves. Thank you, Shaina, for that. Another question, maybe this one is for Karen. What keeps you going after a hard week working with very vulnerable people?
Keeps you going. I think just knowing what you do. I don't find I get tired very easy. I mean, I know how to turn off, and I know how to switch off. But I love what I do, and I'm sure everybody has the same. I love making a difference, and I think that's energizing in so many ways when you hear somebody's voice and say, I feel better, I feel more aware, I'm more alert to my pathway, or to seeing the end of the road, or I've got a new job, I've got something that to me is energizing. So I don't know, I don't look at it like it's stressful and tiring and I'll get home and I'm tired. No, I don't look at it like that. I get home and I feel blessed.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's beautiful.
It simply, yeah.
Purpose. That's beautiful. And boundaries, to do a good boundary between work and your personal life. And obviously there is a huge connection between both, but it's very important for well-being and to try to have some boundaries. Will Yvette or Dassi would like to comment on this question as well? How, after a week working with vulnerable people, how can you keep it going?
I think, Dassi, you should answer that.
And you too, Yvette.
I like Karen. Yeah, I need to go. Unlike Karen, actually, I need to have a few rituals in place for grounding and self, because I am a bit of an empath. So I absorb all that energy and bring it home. So unlike Karen, so yeah, grounding, bit of meditation, walk, moving your body, herbal tea. Lots of herbal tea. Yes.
Fantastic.
The amount of herbal tea that I'm drinking at the moment. Actually, I've found, after so many years of screaming at my computer or telling a child that I can't help them except to talk to them, working at an organisation, Pathways Melbourne, and partnering with such a wonderful organisation like Lighthouse Foundation, that's the answer to how do I do it. I know now that there's dedication, there's commitment. We are going to make sure that this happens. There's not going to be that frustration anymore. We're working towards something that's so important. That's what keeps me turning up and working so hard to make this happen.
Yes, that is super important work with a lot of purpose, supporting people that really need that compassion, that help with navigation of the system. And there is nothing that is more motivating, I reckon, than purpose. So thank you for sharing your answer for this question. And some more questions are popping up here. One is very interesting, I think. I'm not quite sure who will be the best to answer this one. But maybe you can let me know. What support are you currently getting from the Rabbinic fraternity, your organizations or your work?
The Rabbinic,
Rabbinic, sorry.
maybe I can step in. We're working very hard in the Melbourne Jewish community to get the Rabbinic Council behind us. And we do have some wonderful rabbis that are standing up with our work. We need more. So if you can go out there as ambassadors and talk to your local rabbis and tell them about the work we're doing, that will help us tremendously.
It's great to hear you already have support and you can get some more. Yvette, would you like to add something to that?
I would just like to add that I think faith-based organisations are essential for shifting norms around safety and accountability and dignity. So having those communities involved, spiritual leaders involved, is just so important into helping the shift. Yes.
Yeah. We don't get any current support from that way, but it doesn't mean that we wouldn't love to have it. I think, yeah, just like Yvette said, we're faith-based, and I think that's really important because of what you go through. You tend to lose faith not only in yourself, but in others and the system itself. And so rebuilding that to me is so crucial. And you know, we'd love to have more support. We deal with cultural leaders. We do, because a lot of our clients are from many different aspects of religion and spiritual beliefs. But yeah, I think we are faith-based in everything we do. I think that's really important.
I think a lot of faith-based communities, unless the leaders are behind what's happening, that change will never happen. And that's why it's so important to get them behind it.
Yeah, absolutely.
%, yes, so true. And in that terms of the Jewish community and faith-based organizations, there is another question here. What do you say to people who say, but there are no homeless people in the Jewish community?
Oh, that's exactly why we did a need analysis study, because that is exactly what we got. And every single child that has called me up, and to the other safe people in the community that have been called up and been told that, you know, this situation doesn't exist and therefore there are no services for you, that is the wrong answer. We know that this exists. And what's happening is that it's being dealt with very much, you know, as a crisis situation every time that it pops up. And young people deserve much more than that.
Yes, it's very good you did this mapping. I wonder, Dassi, is Pathways is only in Melbourne, or is it also in Sydney or other chapters across the...
At the moment, Pathways is just in Melbourne. We do, if someone calls us up from Sydney and needs some support, we're never going to turn away someone that's looking for support from our organisation. So we will try and connect them with whatever support we can. But we are based in Melbourne and servicing the Melbourne Jewish community.
Thank you for that. That's interesting. Yvette, Karen, would you like to add something for the last question? Yes, Yvette?
I just think a lot of people don't think homelessness is sleeping rough or couch surfing or living in cars or staying in unsafe relationships and having nowhere to go. And I think that it also has a lot of shame around it. So people are quiet. So yeah, I think that's what we're here for. This is why we're doing what we do, all of us, and that is to create more awareness around what is homelessness and what are the pipelines to these affected homelessness people, and then what can we do to shift out of that? Yes.
Yeah, and I won't be political, but I will talk about something. I am very much against Airbnb. And I honestly say it, and I will stick with my beliefs in that way, because I think it has changed the real estate market. But also we need to look at vacant land and vacant homes. There are too many. In Sydney alone, there are hundreds, and it's wrong. And I know we have got experience. We were actually given 3 units. So when COVID was hitting Australia, we were launching, and we were gifted 2 units, sorry, 2 3-bedroom units. And we utilized those to transition women into jobs and careers and pathways, and there were another probably six in our building that were empty. And it really irritated me because they were just being held either for superannuation or used as an Airbnb or just in foreign investors, and they were holding them. And we need to do something about that. We need to look at the housing, the whole thing around real estate. There are so many untruths being told in the real estate market about that there's a lack of housing and a lack of vacancy, and it's just to drive up the market. We see it in some of the developers, and also the use of units for just NDIS and not for housing. Like there's a lot of money coming through on the NDIS just for SDAs and SDAs. And I think all these things need to be addressed and really looked at, because there are homes sitting there with, you know, there is one on the corner, and I call this out and I tell everybody about it, the corner of Fitzgerald and Malabar Road. It's a 2-story home. It has been empty since it was built. It's brand new. It is opposite a school. It is not 5-minute walk to the beach, and it is sitting empty and has been for up to over 15 years. How is that possible? Brand new home. And there's just too many of them that are sitting there, and we need to address this so we can stop this housing issue.
Absolutely. There is nothing more frustrating than to see an empty dwelling just sitting there. And I know that globally, some countries around the world did limit the number of Airbnbs and the short-term kind of leasing, especially in Europe. I think in Berlin, they limit the amount of Airbnb. And of course, more investment into social housing is needed. And also for youth housing solutions, more investment is crucial in models such as the youth forest, for example.
Can I just bring up one other issue, if you don't mind, Maya?
Yeah, go ahead.
Equanimity Project is about, there's actually over 2 million lone people living at home alone with a spare room or spare access. And part of Equanimity Project is developing a program where women and can help other women and support other women. It was really interesting when we looked at all the figures from that, and I think that this is why I want to change the way people see women that are at the risk of homelessness or that are going through domestic violence, that we're not stupid and we're not coming from low socioeconomic. We're being driven from middle and upper parts of society, and this is the problem. And these are women that I know I've helped, and we've transitioned and had them come through and get on with their lives. And I think if more people had that opportunity to go through a training program or some kind of support program, they'd see that these are women like themselves. And I think that's something that we really need to address. And we looked when we did the research, I spent nearly 2 years doing research before I launched this. And there's nothing like us in the world. And I'd like to see that, like even Dassi, I'll have a conversation with you about it. But there's nothing like it. And I think Australia can drive change. You know what I mean? Australia can drive change. Absolutely, we are different. We're creative. We're amazing as a people. And I think that we can drive change if we just come together with that. And that's what we push. That's what we talk about.
It's incredible to see the innovation and to see how it's centered in support of women, of a woman for another woman, and making sure everybody are included and are held and are supported. And as you said, there is so much stigma around it, and people think uneducated or addiction. Actually, the demography of people who experience homelessness these days in Australia is very much of young people under 24 and very much of senior women above 55, very educated. And there is a famous saying that we are all just one terrible event in our lives from experiencing homelessness. So we should really try to debunk those kind of stigmas around people who experience homelessness. And unfortunately, we're about to finish soon. I'm sure there are many questions more that we can talk about. But to close the session today, I'd like to invite Nikki Marzak, board member of the National Council of Jewish Women Australia and chair of the Social Justice Committee, whose leadership and dedication were instrumental in bringing this event to life. So, over to you, Nikki.
Thank you, Maya. Good evening, everyone. There were times during this webinar where I've had to swallow the bubble in my throat. So I suppose I just want to end by acknowledging the strength of all of our speakers, Yvette, Karen, and Dassi, for sharing what you have with us tonight, but also for doing all of the work that you do every single day. Thank you to everyone who joined tonight. This isn't an easy webinar to listen to and to confront. So thank you for approaching it with the seriousness that it deserves. If you or someone you know needs support, please feel free to reach out to any of these organisations or reach out to us at National Council, and we can refer you to Karen and Dassi and Yvette. And if you're in a position to help, whether that is through funding or becoming a carer or an advocate, please visit the websites, and Shaina is going to pop the website, the web links in the chat for you for both Pathways and the Equanimity Project. So please go onto the websites and have a look at how you might be able to help. And I also want to thank Maya Glassman and Shaina Rother, who are experts in their own right in these fields, in social justice fields. Both of them work in the areas of homelessness, poverty, alleviation, and have also enormous knowledge to bring to this topic. And thank you to everyone who was involved in putting this together tonight. And I wish you all a very good night, and thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night. Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much.
much.